Namaste everyone. Welcome to Samskruti Gyan Mala, session 4. This is a series of discussions that we are holding on our channel, and this is the fourth session that we are going to have today. My name is Anupama, and I'm working with Samskruti Foundation as an East Zone coordinator. Today we are going to discuss the topic exploring Bharatiya values and its relevance today. So before we start, I would like to just add that the previous discussion we had was about Dharma, its distinctness from religion. So these topics are very interrelated. So whatever we had discussed in the previous session, we will build on that and we'll discuss more. And with us today, we have Dr. Sudheendhra Putty. I would like to introduce Dr. Sudheendhra Putty to you. He is a company secretary with Cyient Limited, and he has a rich working experience of over 20 years working as a company secretary in government, private sector, and non-profit sectors. He's a winner of ICSI National Award for Excellence in Corporate Governance. Dr. Putty has over 10 years of experience as a journalist also. He's a prolific speaker, a writer, and he attends different programs at different forums and shares his views regarding dharmic values. So today's topic, once again, friends, it is exploring Bharatiya values and its relevance today. So Dr. Putty, over to you.
Thank you so much for the kind words of introduction. I'm extremely happy and delighted to be here in this forum. I've interacted at various points of time with almost all of you, and I'm super thrilled and extremely happy for this opportunity of being here. For starters, let me start at the very beginning. The topic that we have is Bharatiya values, exploring Bharatiya ethos or values and its relevance today. For those of you who do enjoy reading English literature, particularly fiction, and who would probably have read The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes and the entire set. In one of the stories of The Adventure of the Dancing Men, there is a line where Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the author, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, says, "What one man can invent, another can discover." He says, "What one man can invent, another can discover." Now, why do I say this? I will come back to this towards the end of my talk. So let's step back and ponder. But this is something which is very important, and I thought I will start with that. Fine. So at the very topic, when we have a breakdown of the topic itself, it faces us with words such as Bharatiya, values, and related matters. All of us here are very well cognizant, aware of what they mean. And yet, I think it is imperative, before I delve deeper into the topic, to shed some light, some understanding on what each of these words and phrases mean. Values are essentially a set of principles or standards of behavior, those which determine the deportment of a person or a group of people over a period of time, what is right and what is wrong, what determines the goodness of society in general, the abiding by which leads to prosperity and sustainable development of people is what values is all about. Values can be good, they can be bad, and they can be ugly. But then our focus obviously is on the noble values that Bharat has embodied, has enshrined, and practiced, not just for years, centuries, but for millennia. It is this ethos, if I draw a parallel, this is the values are the string on which the garland of Bharatiya culture itself is embedded. The entire string on which the noble and extremely lofty philosophy that India has espoused over the centuries and millennia is threaded through this concept of values. It's also relevant to understand what these ageless, timeless values embody. It is Sanatana. It's of course in the news for various reasons now. Hindu religion or Hinduism or Hindutva, in whichever way we would want to call it today, is in reality a Sanatana Dharma, as against many of the other religions that we would probably find, which are matas or the expressions owing their origin to a book or to an individual, as compared, as juxtaposed with them, our Hindu religion, our Hindu Dharma is not a mata, but it is a dharma. It is not something which is given by an individual or confined to one book. It is something which is timeless, ageless, and something which is endless. So, which is why you get the concept of Sanatana. And it's quite interesting to note that, given my background as a company secretary and a student of law, it's quite interesting that even the British judges in the pre-independent era, the Privy Council, as well as in the House of Lords, have held that the concept of dharma or the concept of law in the Indian context is eternal. Because any student of law would know that custom is a very important source of law. And even in English jurisprudence, one of the fundamental requisites for a valid custom is that it must have immemorial antiquity. Now, what do we mean by antiquity in the English context? It is if a custom can be dated back to the reign of King Richard I, which is somewhere around the 12th century, 1189, less than about 900 years old, that custom is said to be eternal, is said to be existing from time immemorial. But the same British judges, but the same lordships of the Privy Council and the House of Lords have said that this cannot be applied in the Indian context because they believe that Indian legal system or Indian systems of doing business have been existing from time immemorial. So willy-nilly, directly or indirectly, even our colonizers of over 200 years have accepted the fact that our Sanatana Dharma is something which has existed from time immemorial, and there is no way in which the start of this can be even unearthed. One of the fundamental precepts that we have in our Indian value system, in our Bharatiya value system, is acceptance. There is a lot of discussion that happens around tolerance, that other religions, other schools of thought tolerating us. In my humble view, tolerance or tolerating has a very negative connotation. When you tolerate something, you do not accept it, and because there is no other option, you're willing to go with it. On the other hand, Hindu Dharma, Sanatana Dharma, our Bharatiya values have always espoused and lived by the concept of acceptance. I think with this brief prelude of some of these phrases and words, let me straight get into our topic for discussion today. Again, as I said, given that I come from a company secretary's background and I do a lot of work on some of these related matters, I thought I would delve on matters around environment, around society, and governance when I'm going to talk on Sanatana or traditional Indian values. Let me first spend some time on environment. ESG, that is environment, society, and governance, and sustainability are all buzzwords today. You go to any forum, any part of the Western world, everybody is talking about environment, about pollution control, about conserving the environment, and that this is a land which has been bequeathed to us by our forefathers, and we have a fiduciary role that, and we have to bequeath a better land to the society of tomorrow. This is where the duplicity, hypocrisy of the Western world reeks at its very basis. From the celebration of festivals to observance of very simple, mundane things in life, our entire practice has been completely in sync with environment. We are, as a race, as a population, we have always lived in sync with environment. Let's start with celebration of festivals. Many of us would probably know that all our festivals are timed with specific rutus or masas or periods of time in the Gregorian calendar. So Sankranti typically, Makara Shankramana typically comes around the second week of January. And we use til or sesame to make a lot of sweets during that period. It's important to note that it is not without a reason that sesame is used or til is used during that festival, because the skin tends to get dry during that part of the season. And every grain of sesame, even with your 2 fingers, you crush it, it gives you a drop of oil. The reason why you consume it during that period of time is to maintain the pH balance, is to maintain the oil balance in your body. There is a whole lot of talk today about using biodegradable stuff, about not using plastics and so on. Again, there can be no bigger example of hypocrisy that the Western world can pontificate to us. As children, and there are elders here, I remember from my own childhood that when we used to go to the hotels or go across to railway stations, there were no plastic containers, there were no plastic bottles. When we went to get our idli and sambar from Taj Mahal Hotel, we would carry steel boxes from our house to get it back as parcel. Today, everything is coming in plastic, and the Western world today comes back and says, hey, guy there, do not use plastics. Plastics are bad. It's going to cause cancer. It's going to pollute the environment. It is going to remain forever. And who brought plastics to us? It is the same Western world. India has all along lived, our values have all along been that we live in sync with nature. Very simple things, as I said. You go to any traditional home, even today, across South India particularly, food is served on plantain leaves. The plantain leaf, the plantain tree itself, in fact, in Kannada, there is a saying which says, if you have to live a life, you have to live a life like a plantain tree so that every part of you is useful to society. The stem, the leaf, the fruit, the seeds, every aspect of the plant is useful. Nothing goes waste, and all of them are biodegradable. Have we ever wondered why mango leaves are tied in every Indian home on the occasion of any festival? And why is it only mango leaves? And why are they tied only at the top of the threshold and not at any other place in the house? This is because mango leaves are one of the very few leaves that have the capability of retaining, even after being cut off from the tree for several hours, the ability to absorb carbon dioxide and give out oxygen. When there is a function at home, when there is a festival and your friends and relatives congregate at home, the necessity for absorbing more carbon dioxide arises, the necessity for giving out more oxygen arises, and carbon dioxide goes, it's lighter, therefore it goes up, and that is why you tie mango leaves, and that is why you tie it at the top of the threshold. And like idiots, in the name of marketing, in the name of looking jazzy or whatever, we have started tying plastic mango leaves. Pray, what purpose does it serve? Absolutely nothing. For generations and generations, Kanchi Paramacharya had once remarked that if every monsoon, if rains are happening in India, it is because millions of people across the country are observing Ekadashi fasting. On the 11th day of every fortnight, a lot of people in South India, particularly from Karnataka and many other states as well, observe fasting, as they do on many other occasions, on specific days of the month. And there are vratas which people undertake during the year. And this fasting, when it is told from the Indian context that fasting is good for health, it improves metabolism, it promotes good health, nobody is willing to listen. But when the same Western world comes and tells us that this intermittent fasting is good for health, we lap it up without batting an eyelid. We are at that point of time now, what is typically referred to as the Chaturmasya period, a period of 4 months starting from Ashada first Ekadasi until the Lakshadweepa Utsava that happens in Udupi, that's roughly around Kartika Paurnami. A period of this 4 months is typically when a lot of travel is forbidden, particularly for ascetics. Have you ever wondered as to why during these 4 months, ascetics, sadhus and sannyasis sit in one place and they do not turn around, they do not move around? Because as per Shastras, a sannyasi should never be confined to a place for a long period of time because it starts developing attachment. Therefore, it is imperative for sannyasis and sadhus to be constantly, they have to be on an itinerary all the time. They have to be moving around from one place to another, the only exception being during the Chaturmasa period. And this is because when it starts raining, a lot of insects from the ground, from the earth, start emerging out. And this is the period when they start, their population increases, they lay their eggs, and their population develops. And in order not to cause harm to them, and also not to be prone to any allergies for ourselves, this period was prohibited for travel. It was also a period where each month, among the 4 months, in the first month, vegetables are prohibited. A lot of the faithful follow it even today. During the second month, people avoid curds. During the third month, people avoid milk. And during the fourth month, people avoid seeds. The reason again being, when it starts raining, when the first rains happen, that food is offered to the insects, to the birds, to all other living organisms, and the humans forego it for 1 month. From a health viewpoint also, it means that you have a fasting. You are taking off a certain piece of your food from your plate. Because when it starts raining, these insects would have eaten them, and they may be causing you an infection, therefore you avoid them. Similarly, the second month you avoid curd because when the weather gets cold, curd does not set properly, and consuming curd which is not set properly is not good for health. It does not help in digestion. So there is a logic, there is a scientific reason behind every single practice that our Indians have been following over a period of time. We do not bat an eyelid again to walk into a supermarket, purchase perfumes and whatever. Every individual, when he starts wearing his caste mark, it could be vibhuti, it could be gopi chandan, it could be anything, sandalwood paste, it is nature's own perfume which is given to us. It is offered to the Almighty and we accept it as a part of our life. We will not have the requirement of a perfume if all of us started using these traditional ways of offering prayers and accepting the same as offerings to the Almighty. Tulsi, turmeric, neem, I don't even need to tell. The Western world has today taken patents on each of them, and they're coming back and pontificating that this is good for health. This is an antiseptic. This is something which will help you to regain health. I think this is most laughable when we look at it. I'll quickly go through some of the other points on this. What COVID taught us was about cleanliness and hygiene. Social distancing, the need to keep washing your hands often. When you go out and you come back, you need to maintain hygiene. These were all things that our ancient Indian values have always espoused. When you go to a barber, when you go to the house of a deceased, when you attend a funeral, it was expected that the people come back and they do not use those clothes immediately. They are put for a wash and the individual has a bath. The logic, the reason behind being that infection can spread. The same thing which happened during COVID, the necessity for social distancing, the necessity for frequent sanitizing of our hands was all coming back to haunt us, what our ancient seers have been telling us from time immemorial. I'll quickly move to the second pillar, which is on society. So this was as far as environment was concerned. So in a nutshell, if I have to talk about environment, our Indian values, our Bharatiya values have always taught us to live in alignment with nature, to live in sync with nature. The minute we started opposing nature, we started living inside glass cabins, air-conditioned cabins, and we started getting vitamin D deficiency. We started working at nights and sleeping in the day. We started getting problems on obesity. You go against nature, nature has its own way of hitting you back. Society. I think again, the G20, which India hosted very recently, showcased this concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The whole philosophy was one earth, one family, one future. The phrase of a global village was actually coined by a Canadian communication expert called Marshall McLuhan somewhere in the 1960s or 70s. Whereas our Vedas and Upanishads have waxed eloquent on Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam for millennia. The Western world of today will tell us that an island of prosperity cannot exist in an ocean of poverty. Compare this with what our Shastras, our Indian way of thinking, our ethos has always told us. There is a runa, or there is a debt that each individual has to redeem. There is a runa to fellow human beings, to Pitrus, our forefathers, and to the Bhuta, that is to nature. The Panchabhutas that surround us, there is a debt that we owe to them. And hundreds of households even today do not partake of their meal in the afternoon unless they have fed another individual, unless they have fed another living organism. It could be a cow, it could be a cat, it could be an insect, it could be a crow. As a philosophy, as a people, we have lived in sync and have never thought of one and another. We have thought of all of us being one large family. The Ishavasya Upanishad, it starts off by saying, Ishavasyam idam sarvam. When you look at the whole world as being representing or being representative of the supreme being, when the divine is existing in everything, there is no question of deprivation, backwardness, and so on. These have all been thrust upon us over the last 1,000 years by invaders, marauders, and it's laughable that these very people have to now come back and pontificate to us. I can quote chapter and verse, and we have so many elders who know it so much better. Starting from the Rig Veda to the Skanda Purana to the Srimad Bhagavata, there is so much that is enshrined in them about living in sync with nature and about caring for others. All kinds of living organisms. There are suktas in the Rig Veda and Yajurveda which say Let there be peace and prosperity among four-legged animals, among animals which have hundreds of legs, that is insects and earthworms and centipedes. We pray for their welfare. Our Vedas, our Upanishads talk of charity, of living in consonance with others as living together. The Bhagavatam and the Skanda Purana, for instance, there are specific references that an individual needs to contribute 10% for society of his lawful earnings. And today's CSR talks of 2% of profits only for companies. Whereas all our Shastras, all our Vedic literature has spoken about contributing to society. The Bhagavad Gita, for instance, and in the Bhashya of the Taittiriya Upanishad, Acharya Madhva, he goes on to say that there has to be a sense of involvement. It is not a perfunctory way of donating or engaging in charity. It has to, first of all, it has to be commensurate with an individual's will, and it should be done with conviction. Nothing is ever a tick in the box. Much of the compliances that we see today are all tick in the box because there is an inspector standing there, because there is a challan that is going to come, because there is an inspection that is going to happen, we are complying with something. Acharya Madhva says that is never going to be appropriate. Whatever is done has to be with involvement and with conviction. And forget corporate social responsibility. The Taittiriya Upanishad Bhashya, he says there is an individual social responsibility. He says, unexpectedly, if an individual gets to a position, do not refuse to accept it. Take that position and use it for the betterment of society. Use whatever authority you have in your hand, whatever has been given unto you, use it to repay, to bring up for the welfare of others in society, is what he says. I just mentioned that chapter 17 of the Bhagavad Gita, for instance, it makes us eloquent on the importance of charity and the various kinds of charity. People who do it in an ostentatious manner, people who do it with an ulterior motive, and people who do engage in charity without expecting anything in return, what today's law calls as doing pro bono. Like this, there are copious examples from Manusmriti, from Tirukkural, from all kinds of scriptures you will find in the Indian ethos. You will find any number of examples of engaging in charity. All this, the takeaway from this is that you need to look at the society as a whole, much before the concept of a stakeholder. Today in CSR, we talk of employees, of society, of regulators. For generations, for millennia, we have been talking of the whole world being one. Living organisms, all kinds of organisms, because we in India, we in Bharata understood that without a human being, from an earthworm to a lizard, to a monkey, to a donkey, everything can survive. But without an earthworm, you and I cannot survive. There is a role that nature has to play, that every living organism has to play. And that is why we have always learned to live in sync with nature. English language does not have equivalent words for some of the noble and lofty concepts that our Sanatana Dharma has to offer. And one such word is Dharma itself. What is Dharma? Is it a code of conduct? It is doing something right? Is it a set of principles? Is it ethics? Is it righteousness? The answer is no. Like again, the Upanishad says, neti, 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 not this, not this, not this, because Dharma is the very fulcrum, is the very essence of life. And even the Indian Supreme Court has upheld, and there are wonderful books by our own Justice Ramajoyce, where he has expounded exponentially on the concept of Dharma. In one of the judgments, the Supreme Court itself has said that Dharma is something which upholds, supports, and nourishes. Look at the kind of words that are used. Upholding, supporting, and nourishing. Everywhere positivity. Because generally in law, it is always from a negative connotation. Nothing shall be done. You shall not do this. You shall not do that. It is all negative. Whereas the concept of Dharma is all about upholding, supporting, and nourishing. And something which is for the general well-being and progress of mankind. And strangely, in that Supreme Court, and I have given that citation, it says the fulfillment of these objects is Dharma, and it is Hindu Dharma. Again, you go back into our scriptures, the Shanti Parva in the Mahabharata, or the expatiation that Bhishma Pitamaha gives during the Vishnu Sahasranama, or at various other times in the Mahabharata, several prescriptions and proscriptions are given as to what constitutes Dharma. Dharma, in just to understand, is all about the welfare of everybody. What today people are talking about governance, about the welfare of everybody is nothing but a small offshoot of the concept of Dharma. The Mahabharata is very rightly called the Panchama Veda, primarily because it has the Bhagavad Gita in it, it has the Vishnu Sahasranama in it, and to a large extent, it also has Uddhava Gita and several other important concepts. The conversations that we have between Yudhishthira during Yaksha Prashna, for instance, or the conversations between Vidura and Dhritarashtra, or the Vishnu Sahasranama itself, or the advice that Krishna gives at various points of time to the Pandavas. Interestingly, even about women, there is so much of talk of equality of women, diversity and inclusion. There are any number of conversations in the Mahabharata that speak chapter and verse about the role of women. While people have partially out of context and misquoting the Manusmriti have spread canards about women in Sanatana Dharma, the Mahabharata itself, in several instances, and a few of them come to mind straight away, when you look at the conversation in Ekachakra Nagara, when Bakasura has to be fed, the conversation that happens between Kunti and Bhima and the house in which they are living, such wonderful encomiums are paid. Kunti talks about the importance of women in a family. Later on, when they go to the Aranyavasa, when Rukmini and Satyabhama visit them in the forest, there is a conversation that happens between Draupadi and Rukmini. Both of them exchange words on how a woman has to live, on how they are discharging their duties, and how they have rights. So this whole concept of diversity and inclusion that is being talked of as being something new is again laughable. We are a society. Ahilyabai Holkar, the Maharani of Indore, she ruled as a trustee of Paramashiva. She says, Maharudra is the king and I am ruling as a trustee. I'm occupying a fiduciary responsibility today. Trusteeship and fiduciary responsibilities are all buzzwords in corporate boardrooms today. And this has been existing in our lifestyle for centuries together. Now, why is the Mahabharata so important and why do I have a separate busy slide on this is because the Mahabharata itself says, and again Acharya Madhva in his Tatparya Nirnaya says, that here is an echo of everything that you will find in the world. What is here is anywhere in the world, and what is not here is nowhere in the world. There have been talks even that if Gandhari had 100 children, was it not a concept of cloning that existed during the days of Mahabharata? So anything and everything that you can think of in today's world has found a place in the Mahabharata. As I said, you have Vidura Niti, you have Uddhava Gita, you have Bhagavad Gita, the expositions that happen between the various conversations, all of them extol good governance. So why is this focus so much on the past? A lot of people generally tend to ask that when we talk about the history of India, when we talk about the goodness of Bharata, it is all in the past. Why is there so much of a focus on our past? Because it's very rightly said, and as recently as Sri Aurobindo, that those who fail to learn from the lessons of history are doomed to repeat it. If we do not understand the shortcomings of the past, if we do not learn from our past, we will never be able to overcome and get into a better future. I now come back to my first line, those lines from Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, as to what one man can invent, another can discover. Why did I say that? I said that because whatever Sanatana Dharma, whatever Indian values had, whether on environment or on society or on governance, a few examples that I quoted right now have existed. We were the ones who invented them in the days of yore. And the same things are being discovered. Invention is coming up with something new. Discovery is finding out something which already existed. And the Western world is today discovering what our forefathers had invented millennia ago. I'll end with this last word. And this concept, again, we talk about constitution, we talk about duties and rights. One of the fundamental precepts that we have in management is where there is authority, there should be accountability. Where there is authority, there should also be responsibility. In one of his hymns, Dvadash Stotra, the 3rd chapter, 1st verse, Madhvacharya says, Kuru bhungshvacha karma nijam niyatam, haripada vinam radiya satatam. He says, it is unlike the Western world, where there is an extreme. Here we say that please do enjoy life. By enjoyment of life, what he means is, it should be commensurate with your duty. Do your duty and then enjoy the results that accrue or flow out of it. Kuru bhungshvacha karma. Do your duty and then enjoy the benefits that flow out of it. So we talk about rights as much as we talk about duties. We talk about duty, we talk about devotion, we talk about rights. We are a society, we are a people which have always lived in a balance. If I have to summarize the entire conversation or the entire monologue into just one word or into one sentence, it probably means that the Bharatiya thought, the Bharatiya way of life has been all-encompassing, has been something which looks for the greatest welfare of everybody. It does no Vedic hymn says, give me prosperity. No Upanishadic lore says, give me success. We talk about everybody. We talk about peace, tranquility, prosperity, and success for everybody. And we do not distinguish one from the other. So all this talk of diversity, inclusion, racism, parochialism did not exist at all in the Indian context. And that is the true barometer of Sanatana Dharma.
Thank you, Dr. Putty, for such a wonderful presentation. This was extremely insightful, and I'm sure all the participants have really enjoyed this, and we had a lot that we could learn. I invite the participant to ask any questions if you have.
Initiative. So, Sudheendra ji, wonderful exposition here. I would like to ask a question for the sake of simplicity of all our Karyakarta's understanding. If we ask, what are the core Indian values? For the sake of a short answer, let's say if someone asks our Karyakarta, what are Indian values? Can we name a few for a non-academic presentation?
I think the first one is about respect and treating everything as being, and this respect flows from the fact that the other person is just an extension of me. He is not somebody different. I see the same divinity in him as which exists in me. So I think the foundation or the bulwark for anything is respect. In any human relationship, I think the minute you get respect into a relationship, everything starts flowing automatically. With it comes trust, with it comes affection, with it comes prosperity. I think that's a core value as far as human relations are concerned. And if you look at society in general, if you look at even inanimate aspects, I think a subtle distinction we will need to draw. The Western world focuses much more on sympathy, whereas in the Indian context, sympathy again says that you're at a position of superiority and you're looking down upon somebody. But the Indian context, the Bharatiya context, I think is more focused on empathy. You believe that the other person is your equal and you deal with him as your peer. You do not sit in a position of pontificating. Look at even the ancient Gurukula system and a subtle play of words. Students were not questioning the teacher, they were asking questions of the teacher. It was not with a view to test the teacher, it was with a view to increase their knowledge. So even the teacher always, it said that in the life of Veda Vyasa, he had some 72 teachers. He learned even from a small insect is what it is said. So there are, if you look at overall as a concept, I think the ability to question, the ability to debate, and the ability to learn from them is what has distinguished Indian thought. I think I saw a pop which said that acceptance.
Yeah, so I got 3 points. One is respect, which comes from this understanding that divinity within all is same. So only physically we may be different, but the same thing lights all of us, or the same Atman. And then empathy, based on the understanding that we are not superior, but we are all at same level, at spiritually speaking. And then the acceptance. These 3 are the values. Would you like to add anything, or these are the 3 core values?
I think these would be the basics, is what I think.
Thank you. Over to you, Anupama.
Any more questions? Geeta ji?
Namaste ji, Sudheendra ji. You well said. I am very happy about your speech, and I am having one question. What you said in Mahabharata, what is the woman role? You said no. You please explain once again.
Sure.
Sudhir ji.
There are several instances in the Mahabharata where the importance of women is highlighted. For instance, the conversation that happens in Ekachakra Nagara, where the incident of Bakasura happens. There is a conversation that happens between Bhima and Kunti, and the neighbor is overhearing this. There he says, a woman, the summary of the conversation is that a woman is somebody who ennobles and elevates not one but two households. The house in which she is born, she is the jewel of that house, and the house in which she goes as the after marriage as the daughter-in-law, she emancipates and elevates that house. An individual, a male on the other hand, is born and he continues to live in the same house. So a woman is actually doing justice or emancipating two households, the one in which she is born and the other in which she gets into after marriage. There are conversations that also happen between Rukmini and Draupadi when they are in the forest, and Rukmini narrates how she tends to Krishna, the relationship between a husband and wife. There are a couple of write-ups that I had written on this topic, and maybe I'll share them across to this forum. So as to what is the relationship that a husband and wife needs to have, the role that a woman plays as a mother, as a sister, as a wife, the multifarious roles that she plays, and how she plays all of them with elan, how she does it doing justice to all of them, is something that comes up very well in the Mahabharata.
Question. Suhasini ji has raised her hand. So Suhasini ji, you can unmute and ask your question.
Yes, I'm unmuted. A small dot. Maybe I'm right or wrong, I don't know, but I'm having small dot, right? Whether there is a discrimination of caste which is mentioned by the Manu in his book, and whether it has to be followed by each Indian. Like we have seen now we are seeing, and like in Bihar, UP, where the lower caste people, they are deadly against the Manu script. What they mentioned, that because of him, the Hindus who are downtrodden persons, Dalit, are showing low, and they are not getting respect to that. Really, whether it is really mentioned in our Vedas, and the Manu has written all those things, and they will quote one thing, Vedankano, like Vishnu Sahasranamam, they said there is a one shloka, Vedankano Brahmanasya Kshatriyo Jai Bhave.
Vaishyo Dhana Samvruddhasya Chudra Sukhamavapnayat.
Yeah. Dhana Sukham up to earth. Really, what does that mean? I want to know. And whether the Manu, he has really mentioned that Shudras are not allowed in the temples, because that's what they hate, and they are burning the books. And what the Ambedkar ji has done, they get respect to him. Before his last date, he has burned the book also. So really, what they have said is correct or wrong?
Well,
Whether there is any discrimination in it?
Sure. So let me answer you one by one. I think you had about 3 or 4 queries. To go in the reverse order, the sloka which you narrated is actually from the Falashruti of the Vishnu Sahasranama. It is not part of the Sahasranama itself. It is in the Falashruti.
Yes.
So the Falashruti, what it says is, so the whole context is that by reciting or chanting the Vishnu Sahasranama stota, what happens? And
Yes.
there he says, if a Brahmana recites the Vishnu Sahasranama, he gets the understanding or assimilation of Vedic knowledge.
Okay, yes.
A Kshatriya will get victory. A Vaishya will be able to prosper as far as commercial transactions are concerned. And a Shudra will remain happy, will attain happiness. See, at one level, there are specific targets or specific achievements for the other 3 varnas. Whereas for the Shudra, he says he will remain happy, he will remain content, which is the essence of everything in life. The second point that I would want to answer, a lot of these people who have criticized the Manusmriti unfairly, and I made an allusion to Justice Ramajoyce, and he in his book on Dharma, there are actually about 3 or 4 books which he has written. And on one particular book, he writes significantly on the concept of Manusmriti. In fact, he has written a book on Manusmriti itself. Fundamentally, let's understand that a lot of the people who have commentated upon the Manusmriti have no understanding of what the Manusmriti says at all. They have either heard hearsay or they have read translations, which is the biggest culprit.
By the Britishers.
by the British, and even prior to that by Max Muller.
Yes.
So a lot of people have no understand. They make comments on a book or a composition without having any understanding of it at all, without having any first-hand understanding of it. Any student, and those who do research will certainly understand the importance of primary sources of your data and secondary sources of your data. Quoting from something which is already written in a newspaper who has quoted from some other person carries no value at all. Primary source of information is vital. So a lot of people who comment on Manusmriti or any of the other things do not have a proper understanding of it at all. The second point that I would want to highlight is in the Indian context, you have something called Shruti and something called Smriti.
Smriti.
Shruti is something, again, going by Sanskrit, it is something which comes by hearing, Shruta, but whatever is heard. The Vedas are not written in a particular book. All the Agamas, all the Suktas which we have in the Vedas were chanted, were recited, and they were bequeathed, they were passed on from one generation to the other. And the Vedas are eternal. The Upanishads are eternal. On the other hand, you have the Smritis, the Manusmriti, the Yajnavalkya Smriti. There are any number of Smritis. And these are for a period of time. Like we do in interpretation of statutes in law, there are rules for interpreting a law, or there are rules for interpreting deeds and documents. There are certain guidelines that we need to follow. A Shruti or a Vedic edict, Brahma Sutras, Upanishads are eternal. Satyam Vada, Dharmam Chara are eternal. Smritis are time-bound. In law, there is something called contemporaneous exposition is the best in law. If a law was made in the 18th century, look at what the law at that time was. And accordingly, you have to interpret it. So if there is a Manusmriti, or if there is a word which was uttered by Thiruvalluvar in his Thirukkural, you have to understand it in the context of the time period in which it was composed. It is not eternal. A Smriti is not eternal. It has to be interpreted and understood in the context of what was written. The third biggest fallacy that the Western world has heaped upon us, because they do not understand many of our Indian Bharatiya concepts. Caste system and Varnashrama Dharma are different. Caste has nothing to do with Varnashrama Dharma. Our Vedas, the Purusha Sukta, our Smritis talk about Varnashrama. And they were completely mobile. If you look at Dharma Vyada was acting as a butcher. He was a Brahmin. Vishwamitra, who composed the Gayatri Mantra, which is chanted by all Brahmins today, was not a Brahmin himself.
Yes.
So to say that there was caste discrimination, it was not. There was the concept of caste is alien to Hindu Dharma. What Hindu Dharma has is Varnashrama Dharma. A person who practices something, a person who professes a particular profession, he was identified by that, by his dharma. Simply being born in a Brahmin family does not ipso facto make a person a Brahmin.
That's true.
By the same logic, a Brahmin should not, in principle, the Shastras stipulate that the only wealth that a Brahmin should have is knowledge. Now tell me, which Brahmin in today's world is able to live like that?
That's true.
So as much as there are rights, there are duties prescribed. We talk, one of the things which is very often said is all your dana and dharma is given to Brahmins. Fair enough. But do you know that the Shastras also say that if a person has to receive a dana, how much of penance, how much of tapas, how much of dhyana and japa he needs to do? Even though there are temples, there are several, I know several Brahmins, if you go and give them a gushmanda or a pumpkin on a particular day, they will not accept it. They will say, I need to do a certain amount of japa to accept this.
Yes.
When a father performs the Upanayana for his son, when he initiates the Brahmopadesha to his son, he cannot directly do it. For the father to attain the ability to, again, law, contemporary today, the law says, English law says, you cannot give a title which you do not have yourself. Nemo dat quod non habet is the Latin phrase for that. If I do not have a right by myself, I cannot bequeath it to somebody else. So if a father has to pass on the Gayatri Upadesha to his son, he needs to do a certain amount of japa before he can do that. So there are duties which are prescribed for Brahmins. So if I again have to summarize, one, Smritis are not eternal. Smritis have to be understood in the context in which they were made. Caste and Varna are not one and the same. The Westerners and the Islamic invaders prior to that have brainwashed and they have made a mess of many of our concepts. Unfortunately, we are living in a time where we are confused and we have a lot of garbage that we are carrying from those days.
If it is so, sir, it is very difficult to remove it from the minds of all the sect of the people. Still, it is continuing.
Madam, I'll tell you, if there is a bucket of dirty, filthy water, without touching, because if you touch it, you will get filthy yourself. How do you remove that filthy water in that bucket? You have to pour good water. To remove one bucket of filthy water, you will have to pour hundreds of buckets of good water. That day will come when all the filthy water will vanish and you will have only pristine, crystal clear water in that bucket.
One more question, sir, for myself, for my clarification. When we recite the Vishnu Sahasranamam, each one will recite. Why there is a discrimination that Brahmin will get this one, Shudra will get this one? Why like this? Just no Vedanta, no Brahmana.
It is not discrimination, madam. Again, as I said, a Brahmana was supposed to be engaged in Nitya Vedadhyayana. There are 4 duties that a Brahmin has been given. He should learn and he should teach. He should accept dana, he should give dana. This is what is ordained in Shastras for a Brahmana. So, because a person is professing Brahmanatva, and by chanting Vishnu Sahasranama, he gets the phala of Vedantic knowledge.
Okay.
If a Brahmin gets into something else, if a Brahmin does business, though by birth he is a Brahmin, he is now doing the work of a Vaishya. So he will get prosperity in his life. He will get prosperity in his business. That is what it means. So there was mobility. There was complete mobility among the Varnas. If you look at, we have not even heard of those names. I had written about them, and I think in one of the recent books of Vikram Sampath, he talks about somebody called Rani Abbakka in Karnataka, in Ullal, in the southern part of Dakshina Kannada. If you go to, since I happen to be from Karnataka, although I'm born and brought up in Hyderabad, I'm giving you a few examples from there, you will find so much of mobility that happens.
Okay.
If you go to temples in Udupi, you will not be able to Kanakadasa. The Udupi temple, Krishna gives darshana not to a Brahmin, but to a Kuruba, Kanakadasa, who was a devotee, and Krishna turned to give him darshana there, as recently as about 300 years ago, during Krishna Devaraya's time.
Okay, yes.
Thank you, Suhasini ji. Now I would like to request one of our senior members at Samskruti Foundation to add your views or your points to the current discussion. Somnath ji, please.
I'm not going to ask the question, but one sentence I want to add to which was said by that about the Smrutis. As per the Smruti literature, actually in this Kali Yuga we have to follow the Parachara Smruti, not the Manusmruti. Manusmruti is not mentioned to for the Kali Yuga. So when you are going to think about that Kali Yuga, the Manusmruti, you have to think about the Parachara Smruti. Try to follow that one. In that also, why we are going to get a number of the Smrutis means already our learned friend has been explained about that one. It is a time bound one. So 108 Smrutis has been created by written by our Shastrakaras. Why? Because as per the time is going to be vary, the situations are going to be vary, and the Smrutis are going to give a special this one about those things. On account of that one, we should not bound for the Manusmruti. What was said it in there? Actually, we have to know the concept of the Manusmruti is also depend upon the Veda only. All Smrutis are depend upon the Veda only, which they are explained. But the thing is that it is the time bound one. Some of the things which are not actually real for this situation, okay, we can leave them. But actually, in that Smruti literature, we are explained to follow the Parashara Smruti. You are not thinking and you are not following, you are not reading about that Parashara Smruti, and you are asking about the Manusmruti, which is not meant for your type. That is the thing. So we have to go through very clearly and very vastly about the Smruti, then we can know what is the Dharma. Why? Because all Smrutis, when you are going to have a conflict in Smruti and Shruti, Shruti has to be followed, not the Smruti. Why? Because Smruti is the time-bound one. It is going to give you a solution as per the time, as per the situation, as per the things which are there in that time. So we should not think about that one. Veda Kilo Dharma Moolam. So for the Dharma, we have to follow the Shruti. If the Parashara Smriti is also conflicting about anything with the Shruti, then you have to leave even the Parashara Smriti, which has to be followed in the Kali Yuga. So you have to think about that one. You have to think about the time. You have to think about the situations and our place, Desha, Kala, and Sthiti, about all those things. We have to follow the Dharma Shastras. To understand the Smriti also, we have to work for something, and we have to know what is the Veda and what is the concept of Veda. Then only we can really understanding what is the concept of Smriti. This is my suggestion about the Manusmriti and the Smritis. Thank you for the giving a time and to explain my own view. It may be a correct one or not, I can't say. Learned persons has to say that one. This is the thing.
Dhanyavad, Somnath.
Let me just interject for a minute here. Yes, it's very right that if there is a clash between what is said in a Smriti and a Shruti, needless to say, the Shruti is what is going to prevail. Having said that, it is not very simple. It is not so straightforward as well. There are a lot of dynamics or complexities also. For instance, the Taittiriya Upanishad talks about Satyam Vada Dharmam Chara. Satyam Vada, again, does not literally or blindly mean speak the truth always. The Mahabharata again has examples. You look at the Dronacharya incident, Ashwatthama's death.
Yuddha Parva. Ashwatthama. Yes.
So what happens, what we mean by Satyam Vada, again, it has to be interpreted in a harmonious manner. I'll give you a very mundane example. If somebody comes to you and says he has a knife in his hand and he says, I want to slaughter a cow, please tell me where is the cow. If you literally interpret Satyam Vada and you have seen a cow go on that road, you will say, yes, please go into Sindhi colony, it is there, go and slaughter it. Is that Satyam Vada? That is Satyam Vada only in letter, not in spirit. So here Dharma says, Satyam Vada here does not mean if there is a butcher who is coming, you direct him to go and slaughter a cow. Not at all. Satya is something which upholds Dharma. And as far as the example that we took, upholding Dharma here is to safeguard the life of the cow. In the Mahabharata, if Krishna said you do something, that is Dharma. There is no greater authority on Dharma than Krishna. Doing anything against, because Yudhishthira, for all his belief or his pride that he always spoke the truth, that he abided by Dharma, Dharmaraja as he was called, he still had a doubt. But when you do not side with Dharma, and there can be no greater Dharma than Paramatma himself, then Satyam Vada has to be interpreted accordingly.
Whatever has been told by Sri Sudheendhra Putty ji and Sri Somanath ji is very much, I am trying to add a little bit in the context that Geeta or Suhasini has asked the question. That is, this is a contemporary important question when you are dealing with young people. What has been written in Manusmriti applies to only certain periods, not now. Today there is some other Smriti called Parasara Smriti or Devala Smriti or something else. Fine. We need not have to carry Manusmriti on our shoulders also. Let us make it clear. We are working for the welfare of our society at large, and things may change. Smriti may change. Smriti may have to be changed. That is why a lot of Smritis have changed. I shall give one or two small examples. In our childhood, they used to say, whenever somebody burns his part of the body, don't pour water on it. You put some other cloth or something that dry. Don't pour water. That was the first aid they used to say, specifically in my childhood. But by the time I became 50 or 40, they say pour water immediately and cool it down. The heat should not penetrate deep into the body. The reason is, in my childhood, antibiotics were not prevalent. But by the time I became 40 or 50, antibiotics are very prevalent. So infection can be tackled. What is to be tackled is penetration of heat effect into the body deeper. So when the resources have changed, when the situation changed, we have to change the rules. That was the law. That was the Manusmriti. That is, don't pour water is the Manusmriti at the 1960s. But when it became 2000 or 1990, pour water is the Manusmriti. Similarly, it happens in social sphere also. So they are all happened. Second thing is, one more point which I wanted to clarify is, when Vishnu Sahasranama was read or Parayana Kiya, then somebody gets something, somebody else gets something, that is a discrimination. That is the picture that is we are trying to give. When a rupee is given, how he spends, is it not changing? Somebody spends to buy a book, somebody spends to buy a music cassette, somebody spends to buy a bottle of whiskey. It depends on how you put to use, what it gives, it is a sort of a particular energy, and that will be used by the man depending on his background. So that is why only if you are pursuing some Vedanta or some this one, he gets some improvement in that. If you are pursuing something else, he gets some improvement in this one. A Kshatriya need not have to get to Vedanta. He has to get some more valor. So that is why it is all said like that. In that context, we have to understand. And second thing is, let us understand one more thing, which Mr. Pushti also has, Sudheendhra Putty also has explained. We are dealing with a particular situation which has been contaminated since almost centuries. And unfortunately, we could not develop a mechanism to correct it at different intervals, or the correction, whatever has been, it was not very much prevalent or very much pervading also. It is due now. But today also that correction, the society is not yet ready to make corrections. There are a lot of corrections need to be done because of changes, because of resource changes, because of technology changes, other things. This takes some time. We are only going in that direction. We and the caste system and Varnasrama Dharma, as Mr. Putty has clearly told, they are two different things. Only thing is, confusion has been wantonly created by some people and inordinately created by some words used like that also. Now, one thing, let us make it clear. I am reminding you the statement given by Balasahebji Devaras, the third Sarasangchalak of RSS. The caste system as it exists now has to go lock, stock, and barrel. We need not to carry it on our shoulders. If it is there in any book also, that book may be kept in abeyance. There is no problem. We may have to change it for good. But it doesn't mean this Varnasrama Dharma has a bad interpretation. There are very good interpretations. I myself found out in my life one small thing actually. If you want to improve a particular variety of sapling which give a particular quality, what they will do is they will take the seeds of that one and take out that particular seed or particular this one and isolate it. Similarly, in the bacteria, in all these cases also, the same thing they will do. That means they will isolate, form colonies and pick up the best colony and again develop the colonies. Similarly, probably in our society also, long back, when the things were in very raw state, some group of people developed certain traits. Some group of people developed certain traits, and they are kept isolated. I am going a little. This is all my contemplation only. Suppose somebody has developed sculpture. In India, sculpture has risen to very high levels. The community which is doing the sculpture lived for the sake of sculpture. That is, they ate for sculpture, they lived for sculpture, they mingled for that one. Similarly, other communities. Somebody developed, say, craftsman in weaving. We have a lot of laurels that people weaved a sari which can be put in a matchbox or something like that. How could they get that much of perfection? Because they lived for that one. Whole life is a tapas for them. So they did not want any distraction. Suppose you take a weaver daughter and marry it to a sculptor. Would she be comfortable, or she would be comfortable in weaving family? Obviously, she would be comfortable in weaving family because the smell, the odors, the life in weaving family is akin to the weaving. That of sculptor is akin to the sculptor. That of somebody else is akin to somebody else. One cannot be very happy. So they have isolated. But that is at that time that was required. Probably that has originated these isolations. After that, of course, bad elements might have gone in and your discrimination started and others. Of course, we cannot deny one fact that we had caste discrimination followed in India at least in the last few hundred years. There is no denial of it, and we don't accept it at all. It has to go lock, stock, and barrel. Let it keep it in mind, and don't shoulder all those things on our back and then take the burden. We can say bad is bad, good is good, and it's not that our society everything is good. Is not like that. Bad has entered. Untouchability is a part of our society, only it has to go. So let us keep these things in mind. That's all.
Dhanyavad, Shiv Sagarji.
I must compliment Sudheendhra Putty for a wonderful exposition. And I can see that he has spent a lot of time in trying to gather a relevant information. But of course, the subject is a very tough subject. And we keep on picking up something from each one of these sessions. There are 2 points I thought I should mention. One is Sudheendhra Putty referred to ESG, which is now in the corporate boardrooms. Actually, recently I was in USA. I had occasion to study cultural Marxism, slightly in depth. This ESG has its root in cultural Marxism. That right now we don't have enough time. We will discuss that at a later stage. Actually, they are trying to destroy the society there. Communism has failed in the economic sense, basing on the economic principles. Now, communism is entering into the society going into socio-economic dynamics. The socio-economic dynamics are finally taking the shape of entering into corporate. This thing also, actually, they are forcing corporate employees also to behave in a particular manner to suit to this philosophy. It's a very elaborate thing. We can have a separate session on that. That's one point. We should slightly guard against these simple words which are turned out as ESG and all that. That's one thing. Second thing is about the Putty has mentioned about why Brahmins receive dhanam. It is a very significant thing. One king goes to his guru and says, in the course of my duty, I'm killing a lot of people and I'm incurring a lot of papa. Now, I am not doing this for my sake. Then why should I incur this papa? When I have done it for the society, there should be a mechanism of removing me from this responsibility of taking the onus of this papa. His guru understands this. Yes, you're right. Actually, there is one Rishi, a Muni, whom you can request to receive all your papa. So the king sent somebody to him. So the Rishi reacts, telling, why do I receive his papa metal? I say, you go away. He doesn't respond positively. So the ball again question comes to the guru. And guru says to the king, you have not handled the subject properly. He has to be persuaded to accept this. So finally, the guru himself tries to contact this another Rishi. He says, you have to do these things for the simple reason why the king has not killed these people and provided you protection in the forest. You would not have an occasion to do your penance and get your capacities. Your capacities are enabled by the king by virtue of his Rashtra Dharma, by ensuring that you have a peaceful existence. That's why when Rama also goes to Aranyavasa, the first thing he does is he sort of tries to see that all the Muni places and all that they are in a position to attend to their duties, which was disturbed by Rakshasa cult and all that. So then the Rishi says, okay, I'll receive that, but then you also should stand at that time. The meaning was, if this guru also stands there, some papam also goes to the guru, even when it is transferred through a water. The papa is transferred through a water. Dhanam is transferred through a water. In the process, the guru also takes it. Guru accepts it. There, the Muni has the capacity to absorb all this papa because of penance. Continuously, the penance he does. He has the capacity to absorb this papa and still be there what it is normal in the normal course in a normal manner. So these people are supposed to do that and help the society to maintain those things. So it's a bit more complicated matter. It's not that easy to look at. When responsibilities are decided in the society, there is a logic behind all that. Now today, of course, that may not be relevant. Everybody wants to do everything. And we are also seeing the confusion along with that, conflicts along with that. So I thought I'll just add these two. It's a very good subject. I'm sure all of us are also educated on this, and I must compliment and thank Sudheendhra Putty for this. Thank you.
It's been a very learning experience for me. Words of wisdom, a lot of inputs from so many of our elders. Process of learning continues always.
Dhanyawad, everyone. So I just sum up this meeting with a few points which I have actually gathered from the various discussions that we've had today. That our dharma, which is the Indian values, are not religion. I mean, like we gathered from the previous discussion, but yes, dharma is not mata. Mata is what they say religion in modern days, but dharma is a way of life. And dharma is what we do in our everyday life. It is very scientific. It is continuously improving, and it makes our life better. And that is something that actually makes our Sanatan Dharma, an ongoing civilization. Our Indian civilization has thrived over ages because of this knowledge and this way of life. So, dhanyavad everyone. I close this meeting with Shanti Mantra. So please chant Shanti Mantra along with me. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramaya, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kashchid dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Dhanyavad.